Hello everyone, Chris from 6++ here and welcome to another video in our series Playing the Primary, which we focus on the primary aspect of 40k. Today's mission is number 31, Tide of Conviction, and we're going to be looking at how difficult it is to score in this mission, what a projected score may look like, as well as anything specific you need to know about this mission. Let's crack on. Tide of Conviction is a 6 objective mission in a Dawn of War deployment. You score 4 points for holding 2 objectives, 4 points for holding 3, and of course 4 points for holding more than your opponent. The mission tertiary is based around holding objectives in your opponent's half of the board. If you hold one of them, you get 2 points in turns 2, 3 and 4, and at the end of the game you get another 2 points, or 4 if it's the one in your opponent's deployment zone. So, how easy is it to score on this mission? Well, as with all Hold 2, Hold 3 missions, scoring primary is going to be hard work, and the terrain can be very impactful. If we look at this UKTC terrain layout, you can see that it's a 3-3 split on either half of the board in terms of objectives. The one in your deployment zone is reasonably secure, although vulnerable to shooting from the left, and your opponent will have access to your half of the board turn 2 or even 1 with not too much hassle. You can't hold the flank objective through the deployment zone ruin anymore, which makes it much harder to fortify. In fact, I recently tried to hold this objective turn 2 against GSC, and all it did was give him access to a chunk of my army to shoot at. You can already begin to see that this mission will favour the more aggressive armies, who will be able to knock armies off primary quite easily. As such, this means it's going to be really hard to project this score in general, and I'll have to use my favourite phrase again. This is going to be very matchup dependent. A general game plan will be to focus on the left flank in the triangle, making sure you hold 2 for 4 points, and then getting your 2 points tertiary. It's not great, but it's solid. It means you won't be committing too many resources. So going in, we know that trying to hold 3 objectives for 8 points is going to be really hard work. So what does that mean for the hold more? Well, it kind of depends entirely on your army. If you have got a really resilient army, one where you can stick your stuff on those 2 objectives in no man's land and comfortably hold them, whilst putting forward pressure on to try and knock your opponent off of one of theirs, then yeah, you've got a chance. But unfortunately, until the game swings one way or the other, you're probably going to have to settle for your hold 2s, unfortunately, for 4 points, and a hold more is quite unlikely, unless you're able to blast people off it. That might well happen, but the reality is they're going to be able to take you off them too. In terms of the tertiary, we're going to be scoring 2 points if we hold an objective in our opponent's half of the board. Now, if you think turn 1, anything mobile can reach there, and turn 2, hopefully you'll have had some terrain to stage behind and you can get there. It's feeling like this is going to be quite a big punch up in the middle, which means that actually you should realistically be able to make a play on an objective and score 2 points a turn. The really important thing to note about this tertiary is that it's actually not just 2 points for you, because if you think usually the way the game pans out, you are going onto their objective to score those 2 points. But what does that also mean? Well, it means you're knocking them off primary too. And it means they'd only be holding 2 unless they've somehow got something into your half of the board. So it's actually potentially a 6 point swing there each time you manage to do that. So that should be something you really want to be basing your structure around. And if you can be turning over those 6 points a turn, it really will help. And I discussed earlier about trying to play in a triangle, and that left set of triangles, the one in your deployment zone, the one just outside your deployment zone, and then kind of the objective in their half of the board where you want to be being a nuisance on and keep knocking them off it. That could be certainly one way of looking at the game. So that all the way, what is a projection looking like? It's not looking great, I'm afraid. Again, this will depend on matchups, and some armies don't want to come over to your side of the board. Maybe the terrain's really good. In my experience, it's going to be quite hard to consistently hold 3 on this mission. So if we go and say they're holding 2, that's 4 points. That's not great. But let's say we're knocking them off an objective. So that's an extra 2 points. That's 6 points a turn. So that's 24 points we're going to be scoring on the primary. If we have bottom of turn, much like on Data Scry Salvage, we're going to really be wanting to make sure we score our 12 there, as that's a huge buff. As the game progresses, when one person has the upper hand, that's when you'll start getting your hold 3s and holds more. But to begin with, I mean, again, it does depend on your army, but I can talk from my perspective of the Harlequins. You really try not to overextend and make a play and hold those 3 objectives, especially when one is out in the open. It's going to be really hard work. You're going to give your opponent access to all of your stuff, and they can pick and choose what they want to kill. So I would really suggest for this mission just locking down 2 objectives and making sure your opponent also scores poorly on their primary, and then that kind of works itself out. One final thing to know on this mission is that you only get your CP if you're holding your objective in your own deployment zone. Now, let's face it, if you're not holding your own home field objective, you've probably got bigger worries than 1 CP, but it is just something to note. I'm sure there are some situations where it comes up and it's a bit of a pain, so yeah, you need to make sure you're holding your home field objective if you want your CP. So what armies are going to be strong on this mission? Well, you really need to be getting over to your opponent's side of the board to be a nuisance. Close combat armies, especially fast ones, are going to love to get over there and just cause all sorts of havoc. They've got the whole width of the board to play in. You may notice I talk about Blood Angels a lot because they've made my life miserable on various occasions as a Harlequins player. But them loving Forlorn Fury, just, you know, get those Death Company into your lines, causing havoc early on, knocking you off primary, being a nuisance, and you're kind of having to counter punch, but in your own half of the board without being able to get over to their half of the board. That can really hurt. And it will just mean they'll get such a lead on the primary that the secondary won't matter. So yeah, I think in this mission it's either really fast combat or just fast mobile thing that can get to you super quickly and just knock you off your primary, or I guess conversely, armies that can actually play the primary really well and just sit down onto those 3 objectives, score secondaries which involve them staying in their half of the board. They're going to really enjoy that too. So there we have it, Tide of Conviction. I know it was the first mission really ever that had sort of odd objective markers placements, so that's sort of an interesting one, makes it a bit different, a bit funky. But yeah, it can be a really interesting mission, but you just need to make sure, as is so often the case, not to spread yourself about. So yeah, as we've spoken about, this projected score is going to be hard, it's going to be tricky, you're probably going to be scoring a 30, unless you manage to get the upper hand later on. So hopefully this video has been useful. If you do enjoy the series and the other videos, please do give us a like and subscribe. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, all the good places. I'll see you again soon. Take care.